population outside Africa, you'd probably say the United States. But you'd be wrong. Not just a little wrong, wildly wrong. Because the answer isn't America. It isn't the Caribbean. It isn't the United Kingdom. It's Brazil. And almost everything you think you know about Brazil is about to change. But here's the part that doesn't make sense. If Brazil is home to the world's second largest black population, why doesn't anyone think of it as a black nation? No one talks about it that way. You probably didn't learn it in school. You've probably never seen a documentary about it. And unless you've gone looking for it, you've probably never heard anyone talk about it. Somehow, one of the biggest black stories on the planet has been sitting in plain sight, and almost nobody noticed. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. Start here. Walk through Salvador, one of Brazil's biggest cities. You hear Portuguese instead of English. The food is different. The music is different. The architecture is different. But something else catches your eye. Black faces. Everywhere. Not tourists. Not a neighborhood you have to go looking for. Street vendors selling acarajé, fried dough stuffed with shrimp, a recipe carried across the ocean generations ago. Barbershops packed on a Saturday morning, radios blasting, everybody talking over everybody else, churches filling up on Sunday, drums leading a procession down the middle of the street like it's the most normal thing in the world. Because it is. Kids walking home from school in uniforms, grandmothers on porches, shop owners pulling down the gate for the night, doctors, teachers, musicians, construction workers, an entire city, functioning, thriving, unmistakably black. Not a tiny community tucked into a corner of the country. This is everyday Brazil. Now hold that image, because the reason it looks like this goes back over 300 years. Picture a dock, hundreds of ships over hundreds of years, unloading thousands of enslaved Africans onto Brazilian shores. Not a handful of voyages, thousands of them. Most people assume the majority of enslaved Africans were brought to what became the United States. They weren't. The United States received a fraction. One country received more enslaved Africans than any other place in the Western Hemisphere. Brazil. Sugar plantations first, then gold and diamond mines, then coffee, stretching across hillsides that swallowed entire regions of the country. People pulled from different kingdoms, Congo, Yoruba, and the Bantu peoples of Central Africa, thrown together in a country that expected them to disappear. Brazil didn't abolish slavery until 1888, the last country in the entire Western Hemisphere to do it. While the rest of the world had already moved on, Brazil refused to let it go. Now here's what almost nobody teaches you next. Imagine escaping slavery, not running to a hiding spot, not surviving a single night in the woods, escaping, and then building a city, not a camp, a city. Hidden deep in the mountains of northeastern Brazil, enslaved Africans who built a settlement called Palmares. At its height, it wasn't a village. Historians disagree on exactly how many people lived there. Some estimates are in the thousands. Others climb above 30,000. Either way, it became the largest fugitive settlement in Brazil's history. Picture farmland stretching across the hills, cassava, corn, sugarcane, grown by free hands instead of forced ones. Blacksmiths forging their own tools and weapons. Children born inside Palmares who never spent a single day of their lives enslaved. Watchtowers and wooden barricades ringing the settlement, lookouts posted around the clock. It had its own leadership, including a king named Zumbi, still remembered across Brazil today as a symbol of resistance. Its own farms, its own defenses, its own way of life, built entirely outside the control of the people who claimed to own them. Portugal sent expedition after expedition to destroy it, army after army, governor after governor, for almost 100 years.
Cheerios Protein, now in Honey Nut.
Palmares held 100 years of black self-governance inside a country that was built to insist it was impossible. Most people have never heard that name. Palmares. Say it slowly. History remembers empires. Somehow it forgot Palmares. Would you have run? Would you have risked everything just to make sure your children were born free? Now picture a government office in Rio, decades after abolition. Printing presses running, pamphlets stacking up by the thousand, all carrying the same idea. Brazil's leaders called it racial democracy, a decades-long campaign to convince the entire world that its race problem simply didn't exist. A country where mixture had supposedly erased division, where everyone in theory was simply Brazilian. It sounded beautiful. It wasn't true. Black and mixed race Brazilians remained far more likely to live in poverty, far less likely to hold power, far more likely to be victims of violence. The myth of a racial paradise didn't erase inequality. It just made it harder to talk about. Here's the part that will really mess with what you think you know. Ask 10 Brazilians where the line is between black and mixed, and you might not get 10 identical answers. In the United States, race is usually treated like a simple checkbox. Brazil doesn't work that way. Its official census recognizes multiple categories: branco, preto, pardo, and more, describing shades and mixtures that don't translate directly into English at all. Two people with almost identical ancestry can identify completely differently depending on how they look, where they grew up, even how their own family raised them to see themselves. Wait, seriously, a country can have the second largest black population on earth and still argue internally about who even counts as black. That's why two people can look almost the same and answer the census completely differently. But that confusion isn't an accident. It's the direct result of centuries spent trying to blur the very lines this video just spent 10 minutes drawing. Now picture a circle, dozens of people clapping, singing, spinning to a rhythm under the open sky. A plantation owner walks past, smiles, and keeps walking. He has no idea what he's actually looking at. Enslaved Africans in Brazil weren't allowed to train in combat, so they built a martial art and called it a dance. Imagine thinking you're watching people dance while you're actually watching them rehearse how to knock you out. Capoeira, rhythmic, fluid, beautiful to watch. Slaveholders saw people playing. What they were actually watching was resistance, wearing a disguise. Today, walk into almost any Brazilian city and you'll find a capoeira circle. Teenagers spinning through that same disguised choreography their ancestors used to survive, now taught openly as art, as sport, as pride. The same thing happened with religion. Picture a woman kneeling before a statue of a Catholic saint, lips moving in prayer. Only the name she's actually calling on isn't the saint's. West African spiritual traditions were outlawed in Brazil, so believers disguised their gods behind Catholic faces and practiced in secret for generations. Today, that religion, candomblé, fills the streets of Salvador openly, drums instead of silence. What was once hidden to survive is now performed in the open, as culture. But open doesn't mean safe. Even now, terreiros, the houses of worship where candomblé is practiced, get vandalized, sometimes burned by people who still see an African religion as something to fear. Thousands of these houses exist across Brazil today, and many of their leaders are still fighting for the simple right to practice in peace. Picture a stadium, 80,000 people on their feet screaming one man's name, Pelé, a black man from a poor neighborhood who became a global symbol of an entire nation. Now picture Carnival, millions of people flooding the streets of Rio, samba schools spending an entire year preparing for a few nights of parade. The whole world tunes in. Brazilian culture, the music, the movement, the food, the faith has influenced the whole planet. Now picture something else. A favela on the hillside overlooking that same parade. Most of the people living there are black or mixed race. Same city, same culture the whole world can't get enough of. A completely different reality. How does a country export its black culture to every corner of the globe, while the black people living inside that culture face some of the country's steepest inequality? That's not a history question. That's a today question. And yet conversations about race in Brazil get a fraction of the international attention that conversations about race in the United States get. Brazil still has one of the highest rates of violence against black youth in the world. Black Brazilians remain underrepresented in government, in media, in boardrooms. The distance between Brazil's black cultural influence and Brazil's black political power is enormous. Not just that Brazil is black, but that the world still refuses to see it that way. So here's the actual answer. Africa has the largest black population on earth. Brazil has the second largest because of Palmares, because of capoeira disguised as dance, because of a religion hidden behind saints, because of a myth called racial democracy that Brazil told the world and almost got away with, because of a country that still argues about who even counts as black. If the world's second largest black nation could stay hidden from millions of people for this long, imagine what else the map has been leaving out. No one talked about this. Now you're one of the people who can. That's what this channel is for. Finding the stories the world skipped. One overlooked nation, one buried story, one contradiction at a time.